Welcome back. We are in Senior AP English, and our objective now is Hamlet 1-2. I have already commented at the end of my prior lecture that at the beginning of Hamlet 1-2, we are introduced to the new king of Denmark, the brother of the dead King Hamlet, whose son we will meet here presently. And Claudius comes on looking every bit the part of a monarch. He looks like a monarch, he speaks like a monarch, he's very good at legislating and delegating. He will speak about this Norwegian problem with the young Fortinbras. He will then turn to Laertes and ask Laertes what his interests are to return to Paris. He will make some observations with Laertes' father, Polonius. And then finally we are ready to meet for the first time the lead character of our play. And as we kind of get to that point, let's make some observations about the different ways this can be done. The first time we see Hamlet is important for your notes. The first time we see Hamlet is important. When we go to watch this performance, or we watch it, for example, in film versions, there are many of them, we're always interested in the very first moment that we meet Hamlet. Now, I want to pause here for a moment and make an observation about Shakespeare in general, because you're going to be reading other Shakespeare plays. One of the ideas is that I'm modeling for you a certain kind of close approach to how to read Shakespeare. Then what you do is you take this approach that I'm modeling for you, and you kind of apply it to other texts that you're working with of Shakespeare's. Let me give you one simple example of how to do that. Ask the question, what's the first time we meet the lead actor, and what is it that he says? That is an intriguing question. And almost without exception, the lead character for Shakespeare's plays will not appear in the first scene. So, for example, Macbeth opens. I will reference Macbeth a number of times here because I know that you've seen it recently, okay? But remember, Macbeth opens with witches. It doesn't open with Macbeth. You don't see Macbeth for a while. R&J opens, remember, with a fight. You don't see Romeo until later in the first act, correct? Think about Julius Caesar. Poorly named, as we probably said to you, or someone said to you in your sophomore exposure to the play. Caesar is not, of course, the protagonist of that play, but rather Brutus. But notice you don't see Brutus right away in regards to this play either. So the first time that the lead actor is introduced, it's always interesting to see how he's introduced and what is it that he says for the first time. At no point is this more sure and more clear than in the study of Hamlet himself. Hamlet must be dressed in all black. This is huge. Hamlet must be dressed in all black. The actors will do, or the producers of the play will do something to make Hamlet look as if he's been living underground without the advantage of sunshine for a long time. They're going to use makeup to make him look almost ghost-like. He's going to be so pale. Okay? Always dressed in black, always pale. What is up with this? Do you have any sense at all of what's going on with Hamlet and why he would be so pale and why he'd be dressed in black? He is in the process of mourning the passing of his father. All right? So he hasn't been outside. He's been cloistered inside, and he's been in mourning. We're going to find out that Mama is really worried about Hamlet. She's worried about his behavior. In similar ways, you'll remember in R&J, Lord Montague was worried about Romeo and the fact that he sat in his bedroom cloistered, pining away for the love of Rosaline. You'll maybe recall at the beginning of that play. This idea is now going to be played out iconically on stage by the way he looks. Hamlet looks like a wreck. Okay, we're going to see this. He looks like a wreck, like there's something already kind of wrong with him. And of course, we're going to understand there's all kinds of ways there's things wrong with Hamlet. One of the coolest ways I've ever seen this performed, though, is for all of this other stuff to happen, and then all of a sudden Claudius will turn now, and he will say, "And now my cousin Hamlet and my son." And he will speak to Hamlet for the first time. That's what Claudius' stepdaddy will say, okay? Now, this is the situation. You've got a mom and her lover, stepfather situation, where stepdaddy comes home and says to the new son of his, come to Papa, I'm your new dad, come to Papa, okay? And the son says back, no, you're not. You're not my dad. I don't even want to think of you as my stepdad. This, of course, is exacerbated even worse by the fact that we're talking about Claudius as Hamlet's uncle. And on top of it, not a favorite uncle, but the uncle he loathes. Hamlet loathes Claudius to begin with, right? So there's bad blood between the two to begin with. And now Claudius is going to show up and say, come to Papa, come on. Now there's a problem here. The problem is that Hamlet wants to just say to his uncle, you are a wretched SOB, I want nothing to do with you. The only problem is, Mama really loves this guy. That will be important from the very beginning when she comes onto the stage with him. The way she looks at him will tell you she's totally into this guy. And herein obviously is the problem. For any stepkid situation, this is always the problem. If you make a lot of ripples and waves, you create negative energy for your mom, and usually you love your mom. And so in that regards, you don't like the stepdad situation, but you recognize that your mom is happy, and so you're kind of stuck. That's where Hamlet is. I saw a performance of this play once, quite compelling, where Claudius has done all of his stuff in 1-2, and then he turns and he says, and now my cousin Hamlet and my son, and it looks like he's not talking to anybody. There's curtains there at the side of the stage. And you hear the words, a little more than kin and less than kind, the very first words that Hamlet will speak. And as he says them, the speaker raises his head. He's been standing there the entire time, but he's been standing there in black with a hood on. And his head is down, so you cannot see. You make no distinctions between the curtains that are black and the black that he's wearing. But as he says a little more than kin and less than kind, he raises his head, and he's almost luminous because they've made him look so pale. And in that moment you realize, holy crap, he's been standing there the entire time. Makes you want to go back and watch the performance again to recognize, sure enough, he came onto the stage, he came from the other side. So everybody comes on one side, he steps out on the other, right next to the curtains. You never even know he's there the entire time. However it's done, and we always go to this play to see how is Hamlet introduced for the first time. The first lines that he speaks are an aside. Now let's talk Shakespeare for a moment. Shakespeare, as you already know, is the great, not creator, but certainly he crafts better than any before him, the use of the aside and the soliloquy. Now we need to understand this technique that Shakespeare will use so well, and nowhere better than in this play Hamlet. What is an aside? What is a soliloquy? And what are the differences between the two? Well, let's first point out that both the aside and the soliloquy are spoken lines for the audience. For the audience, okay? They're not for the people on stage to hear. They're for the audience. 2, they are intended, these lines are intended to explain the psychological dimensions of the actor. Okay? So in other words, it tells us what the actor is thinking. If you're making a film, you can voice over, can't you? Asides or soliloquies, right? You don't even have to have the actor's mouth moving because you can voice over and the audience understands it's what the character is kind of thinking, correct? Shakespeare wants us to be able to hear what the actor is really thinking, and the way he does it is in an aside, spoken when there are other people on stage, but they're going to pretend like they don't hear what it is he says. Or a soliloquy, S-O-L, meaning one or alone. A soliloquy is when you have a character stand on stage and speak only to the audience, alone. Soliloquy. Let's say something interesting statistically about the work of Shakespeare. No other play of Shakespeare's will have more soliloquies and asides than this play. That's why many times we will say this is the most psychological of Shakespeare's plays, because so much of what Hamlet's going to say is specific to the audience. He's thinking these lines, okay? I would also point out that in each one of our acts, we will have a very important set of lines, soliloquy, that will play heavily in the overall understanding of the play. In every act, we will have one moment of powerful soliloquizing that happens. I've already mentioned in an earlier lecture the famed to be or not to be. That is the question. That's a soliloquy. In other words, when Hamlet speaks those lines, there is nobody else on stage at that moment. I should point out, to just drive this point home, that the very first time Hamlet speaks, a little more than kin and less than kind, in the folio, it is assigned as an aside. In other words, the very first time Hamlet speaks, he doesn't actually speak to anyone on stage. He speaks to you, the audience member. In some ways, what Shakespeare almost seems to want to do is to connect a certain kind of relationship between Hamlet and the audience, so that early on you begin to identify with this kid who is stuck in a really wretched situation. He's lost his daddy to death. We're going to hear a tragic death. While his daddy was sleeping in the garden taking a nap, a serpent came and bit him, and he died quickly from the poison. That's what we're going to be told. That's in fact what Hamlet believes at this point is the way his daddy died. Then almost immediately his mom turned around, found the uncle he hates the most, brought him home and said, "Welcome to your new papa, here you go." Of course, think about this. Hamlet's daddy was a king. Not unlike Telemachus's daddy was a king, right? And yet Hamlet is not next in line to the throne because of his mom. In the same way that Telemachus doesn't just go right to the throne as soon as Odysseus doesn't come back from 20 years abroad, because Penelope's still alive. Therefore, remember in the Odyssey, Penelope must marry. Well, Hamlet's mom will marry, but she'll do it really quickly, and so Hamlet is majorly split. He loves his mother, but he's deeply angry at his mom for doing what she's done. In the meantime, Hamlet is mourning his father's passing, and in this regards, he's been acting strange. It's fairly clear Mama's worried about her boy. She has told the new daddy, deal with him. I don't know what to say to him. You deal with him. So Claudius will now speak to him. And you also get the sense, this is the first time that Claudius and Hamlet have spoken since the passing of his father. And now my cousin Hamlet and my son. Notice, of course, Claudius is aware we are relatives. And now we're also in the family. You see how this works, right? So in other words, Claudius is kind of aware this is a little bit of a thorny situation. A little more than kin and less than kind is what Hamlet says to Claudius. What does that mean to you? A little more than kin and less than kind. What does that mean to you? How is he a little more kin?
He's not just our cousin.
Yeah, now it's not just an uncle situation. It's a daddy, stepdaddy, yuck situation. A little more than kin. What does less than kind mean?
He hates him.
Right away, Shakespeare wants us to understand, right away, Hamlet is having none of this stepson garbage. None of it. Doesn't like it, doesn't want it, and yet doesn't have much to do. Can't do much about it. The quintessential stuck moment. I've lectured this play for many, many years, and a number of my students have said, whoa, that very thing happened to me. Exactly. That's exactly what happened. I mean, my dad ran off. My mom went out to the bar, found somebody else, brought him home and said, this is your new dad. Here he is. And the stepdad tried to play the role. And I was like, oh, you ain't my dad. What is wrong with you? And then there was this friction and it turned nasty. This is a very modern play in that regards. After Hamlet responds, a little more than kin and less than kind, the king will ask him an interesting question. How is it that the clouds still hang upon you? Can you put it in your own words? One of the things I dislike about this volume that you're working with is am I right? They give you an explanation and quote-unquote easy language on the effacing page. Am I right about that? It's a real tragedy because what it does is it cripples you into believing you can't read this stuff and understand it on your own. I would recommend that you not look very much at that before you try to think of it on your own. What does it mean? How is it that the clouds still hang on you? What does that mean? What is it that stepdad? What's going on? Why are you still sad? Hey, come on, boy, wake up. It's done. Stop being so whatever it is you're being. Hamlet's response is intriguing. Now he does speak to his stepdad. Not so, my lord. Take a look at what he says. I am too much in the sun. He says, no, you got it all wrong. I've been sun tanning. In fact, I'm burned by being in the sun so much. Now, of course, there's a serious, obvious joke here. Hamlet's so pale he looks like the full moon, right? Like I said, he hasn't been outside for so long. He's completely white. So for him to say, no, you got it all wrong, I've been sun tanning, is an obvious joke. Clearly, he hasn't been in the sun. But then Shakespeare will play a game with us that he will play in every one of his great plays. I lament that I cannot do what I'm doing with Hamlet with all of the major Shakespeare plays. It would be a lot of fun for me to do that with you. And one of the things I would point out is the brilliant way Shakespeare plays word games. His intellectual audience will catch it all the time. There's two spellings of sun. S-U-N would turn Hamlet darker. S-O-N is the relationship between he and his dad. No, you've got it wrong. I am too much in the sun. The intellectual audience immediately picks up. This tells us right away, Hamlet is not at all pleased about being now stepson to his uncle, Claudius, the king of Denmark. Yuck, he's obviously not clearly not happy. The queen, his mom, has had enough of it. She steps forward and says, good Hamlet, cast thy knighted color off, and let thine eye look like a friend on Denmark. Now, just to remind you, English observers of this play would understand what maybe you don't. When she uses the word Denmark, she's not talking about the country. She's talking about the king of Denmark. Cast thy knighted color off, and let thine eye look like a friend on Denmark means what? This is your new dad. You need to be nice to him. The king of Denmark. This is your dad. Notice she continues. Do not forever with thy veiled lids seek for thy noble father in the dust. Thou knowest 'tis common, all that lives must die, passing through nature to eternity. Put it in your own words. What is it she said? Don't be so sad. Everyone's got to die. Your daddy died. Everyone's got to die. Why are you so upset? Notice Hamlet says, I, madam, it is common. And let's point out, since obviously we're doing a thematic reading of this play, as you'll want to do for all of the plays you look at Shakespeare, there's always themes going on, and one of the major themes of this play is death. Yeah, she says, everybody's got to die, to which he says, yeah, you're right, everybody's got to die. It is common. Mama comes back, though, and she asks him an intriguing question. If it be, and of course, I'll go ahead and point it out now, but we're way early into this play. Did you just see what I read? If it be? Earlier I was reminding you, the most famous soliloquy of this play is to be or not to be. Again, already, I'll have sometimes student readers are like, did Shakespeare know later he was going to write that famous soliloquy to be or not to be? And so he plays the game right here where his mom is the first one to say, if it be, in other words, if it be common that everyone must die, why seems it so particular with thee? And it's at this point, if you're going to play this part of Hamlet, you are one stud actor. Here's why. You have to be able to play the role as a range of unbelievable emotions. When Hamlet starts out, he looks like a wimp, standing there, all slumped over, all white. Not so, my lord, I'm too much in the sun. He's clearly upset. He's sighing. He's unhappy. And the minute his mom says, why does it seem so particular with thee? In other words, you seem to really be upset about this. The minute she says the word seem, he's going to, like you've thrown Coleman fuel on a fire. And the minute she uses the word seem, he completely changes his persona and he's ready to rip her head off. And for you to play the role of Hamlet, you've got to be able to do this where you look like you're really sad. And then all of a sudden you're like ready to just jack somebody good. It's one of the reasons why the Mel Gibson choice was probably on some level the right choice. Because of some of the films that Gibson had already made where he could be kind of a half-cocked cop where he was, kind of sad and everything. But then he'd just get nutsoid and, I don't know, cuff himself to a bad guy, jump off a building or something like that. I mean, kind of playing like you're not all completely there. Hamlet will look back and say, seems, madam? Probably your folio has the exclamation mark. It should if it doesn't. Nay, it is. I know not seems. Whoa, 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 whoa. We got a whole conversation happening here on stage between mom and son. And everybody else on stage will do one of these kinds of things. Ooh, okay, just... Mom and son are ready to go at, you know. He looks at her, he says, seems, madam? Nay, it is. I know not seems. What's he so upset about? Can you guess before he says it? She seems to imply what?
Like it's not that big of a deal.
Mm-hmm.
Keep going.
Like, why do you care about your father?
Why do you care? Keep going. Because he's clearly dressed.
He's like, maybe she thinks he's like mad because he's not going to get the throne or something.
Maybe you're pouting. Stop with your pouting. Enough with the pouting. We're going to see a lot of pouting in this play. Hamlet will have, are you ready for this? It's why you studied since September with me to get ready to read this play. Hamlet will have some of Odysseus and some of Achilles. He will pout like Achilles, but at other times he's ready to fight like Achilles, rage. And this is one of those moments early on. I mean, he hasn't spoken 6 lines. Nay, madams, not seems, but is. Let's say it out loud. Hamlet understands or believes that his mother is suggesting he's faking it. He ain't real. He ain't real. Which will introduce now one of the major themes of our play. And that is, well, it's the opening line of the play. Who's there? In other words, what is real? And how do you know what's real? Right? That is to say, Hamlet's going to be offended that his mother is suggesting he's acting. Now follow the irony of this for the intellectual audience. We are watching a play called Hamlet, where these lines have been written by this genius writer and then given to these actors who are then going to come on stage and play the lines. This is maybe one of the reasons why this play above all plays is an actor's play. If you're in the world of theater and drama and acting, this is always a play you grew up cutting your teeth on, because there's all of this kind of stuff being said by Shakespeare. The mom says, what is wrong with you? Why are you acting? And of course an intellectual audience will say, because that's what he's paid to do. He's an actor. He's standing up there playing the role of Hamlet. Hamlet's going to respond by saying, I'm not acting. This is me real. Well, let's take a look at how he says it. 'Tis not alone my inky cloak, good mother, nor customary suits of solemn black, nor windy suspiration of forced breath, no, nor the fruitful river in the eye, nor the dejected favour of the visage, together with all forms, moods, shapes of grief that may denote me truly. These indeed seem, for they are actions that a man might play. But I have that within which passeth show. These but the trappings and the suits of woe. Put it in your own words. It's a beautiful bit of poetry, by the way, in terms of just the wonderful iambic here. And to speak these lines, you almost got to spit them at times to get them out of your mouth correctly. What does he say to his mom? Yeah, you can dress up to look sad, wear black. Fruitful river of the eye, you can cry, all those kinds of things. All of those are actions that a man might play. In other words, yeah, you're right. I could be faking it to let everyone think that I was the son who loved his father and now he's gone and I'm really sad about that. But I have this within which passeth show, these but the trappings and the suits of woe. Whoa, 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 what did he just say to his mama? Can you read between the lines? What has he said to his mama? Well, let's ask a simple question. Why is he mad at his mom? Her hasty marriage to another man, especially to the jerk of an uncle, Claudius.
So he's like accusing him.
Ah, notice what he's saying. I'm the real one. You're the fake one. Don't even use the word seem with me. I don't want any of that seeming crap. I'm the real thing. I have that within which passeth show. These but the trappings and the suits of woe. No, I'm for real. Which seems to imply who ain't for real. Who is the actor? Now, note the irony, and this is why actors love this play so much. They're both actors. They're standing on a stage, and we're audience members watching them act. But Hamlet will right away say, I'm not acting. This isn't acting. I'm not acting. I am the real deal. She's the actor. You. Ugh. Like that. All of that nastiness is there. The king has had enough of it. He's had enough of it. You will not treat my new wife that way. You know, that kind of thing. So now the king will step forward. Notice what he says. 'Tis sweet and commendable in your nature, Hamlet, to give these morning duties to your father. Oh, you're such a sweet boy. I mean, you can just see it. As I say, anybody that plays this role, you just immediately kind of bow to them and go, okay, you're obviously the bomb in acting. There's only a few actors in the history of acting that really play this role, and there's a reason for that. There's a lot of actors that have turned down this role. They've been asked, would you mind doing Hamlet on Broadway or off Broadway? And they're like, no. Because to do it well, you have to be able to act with your face. When the king starts saying this to this kid, he's going to just like ready to go Achilles on this guy. Did you just call me a wimp, sweet and commonable in my nature? In other words, oh, you're such a sweet boy. It's not like the king is done. Notice if you scan, you got another 10 more lines. He is going to rub Hamlet's nose in it, and he's going to do it with the most polite, kingly-like of language, right? Notice what he says. But you must know your father lost a father, and that father lost his. And the survivor bound in filial obligation for some term to do as his sorrow. But to persever in obstinate condolement is a course of impious stubbornness. 'Tis unmanly grief. Ooh. What did he just call this kid? A wimp. Stop being a wimp. Really? Your dad died. Get over it, kid. Enough with it. You need to be a man. Let's go ahead and say it now. There's a reason why 1-2 is such an important framing scene for us and why I'm spending so much time with it. The theme of manhood will be all the way through this play. Of course, this is a theme we're already familiar with if you know the play Macbeth. Lady Macbeth will say of her husband, and yet I fear he is too full of the milk of human kindness to catch the nearest way, in her first soliloquy. That is to say, he's too much of a nice guy to do what it takes. That is, kill old man Duncan to take the throne. Later, when Lady Macbeth and Macbeth are together, she will ask him, are you afraid to do this? How many guys have done really, really stupid things because somebody said, dude, are you like a wimp? You're afraid to do it. How many guys have done really stupid things? And of course, Lady Macbeth is deeply aware of this fact that a male's ego, his manlyhood, is all of... Remember, Achilles is really offended, not about losing Briseis. Hello, he can go out and get any woman he wants. It's not about losing the girl. It's about his ego. One guy takes the other guy's girl. That's the thing that really makes Achilles mad. Here, the king will say, you're a wimp. Don't be a wimp. Unmanly grief. It shows a will most incorrect to heaven. You're acting as if you don't love God. Right? A heart unfortified, a mind impatient and understanding, simple and unschooled. Now we're going to find out that Hamlet is a scholar. Okay, he's away from Wittenberg where he's been at school so he could come back to bury his daddy and then find out his mama had to get remarried. He's a student. And in fact, we're about to find out he wants to go back to school. Notice daddy here will say, stop acting like an ignoramus. Now, to say that to an academic or an intellectual is a good way to just insult them right out. Every one of these, I could go into more detail, I won't, are insults to Hamlet. But notice they're done in the most pious of language, as the king will speak. For what we know must... There it is for the second time. I told you, I start lecturing this poem and some students are ready to ask me, really? Because everybody in this town knows to be or not to be as the most famous lines in the English language. And yet notice for the second time in one scene, now the king will use the language. For what we know must be is as common as any the most vulgar thing to sense. Why should we in our peevish opposition take it to heart? In other words, if you know that everyone's got to die, why be worried about it? Don't worry, be happy. What's wrong with you, son? Fie! 'Tis a fault to heaven, a fault against the dead, a fault to nature, to reason most absurd, whose common theme is death of fathers, and who still hath cried from the first core till he that died today. This must, there it is again, be so. We pray you, throw to earth this unprevailing woe, and think of us as of a father. For let the world take note, you are the most immediate to our throne, and with no less nobility of love than that which dearest father bears his son, do I impart toward you. Whoa, what has he just said? I love you more than your father loved you. I'm your dad. Come on, come to Papa. And you can just see, I mean, Hamlet, notice, is saying nothing here, but his body language is bordering somewhere between repulsion, and just wanting to go tear the throat of this man out. The only thing that keeps him from it, and that's usually when you direct this play, you have to try and help the character who's playing Hamlet, the actor who's playing Hamlet, to know how are you going to look at your mother in these scenes. Think about on stage how you want this set up too. You want to be able to watch Gertrude's face, who's only spoken just a couple of lines thus far, but you want to be able to see her reaction to what he's saying. You can almost see her playing with her hands like, oh, I hope this works out. This is the thing we said we were talking about. Hopefully Hamlet will be able to hear what Daddy has to say now. You know, that kind of thing. And then Hamlet, who's just ready to just tear somebody's throat out. It's almost as if he's been mourning, but now he finally has a place to, to kind of force all of his grieving, and he's ready to go violent. He's ready to go postal. I mean, he's going to go Achilles on somebody. And then, after all of this nice long speech of the king's, he will then, irony of all ironies, will say, for your intent in going back to school in Wittenberg, it's most retrograde to our desire, and we beseech you, bend you to remain here in the cheer and comfort of our eye, our chiefest courtier, cousin, and our son. Coming back to that a little more, too much in the sun. Ironically, a murderer speaking. Claudius will have killed his own brother and taken his brother's wife to get to the throne. Okay, we will soon find this out. Hamlet does not know this at the time. He just knows he doesn't like the SOB. He doesn't know that the guy's a murderer. Ironically, the king will ask Hamlet to stay in Denmark, which will allow for Hamlet in a few hours to have a conversation with his father's ghost on the battlement, where his father's ghost is going to tell him, while I was sleeping in the orchard, it was no serpent that stung me. Somebody snuck into the orchard and poured poison down my ear, and it coursed through my body, and it killed me almost immediately. It was a horrific way to die, which is why I didn't have any chance for last rites. What a terrible way to go. The serpent that did sting me now wears the crown, he says. Wonderful poetry, right? You get this nasty word picture of a snake with a crown, which is, of course, this guy. Note the irony. I want you to stay. Hamlet's mom then will step forward. She's got to kind of break them up. Do you notice how mothers in a stepfather situation are always the ones running the interference, right? So she steps in now to run the interference. Notice she says, let not thy mother lose her prayers, Hamlet. I pray thee, stay with us. Go not to Wittenberg. Notice Hamlet says, I shall in all my best obey you, madam. And he'll point that out. In other words, I'm not doing this because my stepfather told me to, because he's some wretched king of Denmark now. I'll do it for my mom. Notice the king. Why, 'tis a loving and a fair reply. Be as ourself in Denmark. In other words, he says it out loud. Hamlet has full power, just like the king. Madam, come, he says to his wife. This gentle, and notice what he calls it, unforced accord of Hamlet sits smiling to my heart in grace, whereon no jocund health that Denmark drinks today. But the great cannon to the clouds shall tell, and the king's rouse the heavens shall brood again. Re-speaking earthly thunder, come away. In other words, let's go have a party. We're going to find out Claudius is a heavy drinker. He is an undisciplined man, but he is some kind of criminal. He's very, very shrewd. Now Hamlet is left alone. And for the very first time, we get to hear from this kid, who is clearly in a bad way. Let's listen to what he has to say. Oh, that this too solid flesh would melt, thaw, and resolve itself into a dew. Or that the everlasting had not fixed his cannon against self-slaughter. Oh God, God, how weary, stale, fat, and unprofitable seem to me all the uses of this world. Fie on it, fie. 'Tis an unweeded garden that grows to seed. Things rank and gross in nature possess it merely. That it should come to this, but 2 months dead, nay, not so much, not 2. So excellent a king that was to this Hyperion to a satyr. So loving to my mother that he might not beteem the winds of heaven, visit her face too roughly. Heaven and earth, must I remember? Why, she would hang on him as if increase of appetite had grown by what it fed on, and yet within a month? Let me not think on it. Frailty